Hello. You join me today deep in the heart of London's theatre district, renowned the world over for its sensational performances and star-studded shows that thrill the crowds year after year. And who can resist the smell of the grease paint, the roar of the crowd, made even more special at Christmas, that most wonderful time of the year. So please, take your seats as our very own Sidney lifts the curtain on the next window of our TooFatLardies Advent Calendar for 2021 and shares with us just what is it about going to the theatre that inspires his wargaming. Drinks are available in the foyer in the interval.
How do we stage our war games? And how do we remember them? Do we remember them as being a competition, consulting rules and looking at charts to find the results? Or do we remember our war games as games played with friends in a social environment? Or do we like to remember our war games as collections of moments which take us into the heart of the action that we're trying to recreate, experienced from the eye's view of a small metal figure? I imagine that each of us probably remembers all three of those, possibly at different times or at stages of our hobby. I know I certainly do. But the games that I remember best, or perhaps the ones I like to remember most clearly, are those where I'm immersed in the action. I'm thinking along the same lines as one of the combatants, trying to measure myself against the challenges on the table and just possibly gaining an insight into what it might have been like to be in that battle. I can possibly see some of you at the moment being a little bit sceptical. You're thinking, what on earth's he on about? Is he deluding himself again? Miniature war games are really governed by rules, and the gaming element of the hobby relates to the action on the tabletop. And it's certainly true that outside of the rules there doesn't necessarily need to be an additional context or theme which influences the players. And many of you might argue, isn't wargaming like many other activities in that regard? For instance, you can go to a theatre, watch a play, marvel at the set design, be impressed by the costumes and follow the playwright's message. That should be enough for a good evening out. But I think there's something more, and as any stage actor would tell you, the thing which really lifts a performance is the audience and their reaction to what's happening on the stage. It's the buy-in, the participation, the energy of involvement and reaction which drives the actors on. And those two things are reciprocal. And a theatre play without an audience is, well, it's just a rehearsal. So creating a theme and a context in the staging of a war game, whether within or alongside the rule, is a bit like trying to get a theatre audience to be drawn into the drama of a play. And I thought about these sorts of ideas a lot when we were doing games on the First World War about 10 years ago. And in playtesting Flashing Blades, I've been thinking about it again, in trying to think of different ways I could really try and immerse players in the context and the theme of a game. And the metaphor I came back to time and time again was really that of a theatrical performance. There are some things around the fringes which I think are really useful. If one thinks of the rules of a war game, I sometimes think that devising those is a bit like working from the inside out. You need to think about the mechanisms and the consistency between those mechanisms and how that regulates the rules. But staging a game is a bit like working from the outside in. It's really trying to get the players to imagine the world of your war game through history books, of course, but also by the images that you use, or cards or photographs, or dozens of ways of visualising the world and the game that you're trying to create. And it doesn't really matter if you're trying to create 17th century France or Normandy in World War II. If you want to get players immersed into a game, you have to think yourself there in the first place. I think part of doing that is setting a scene, conveying your sense of the world that you're creating through the background to give to your players or the opponent before the game starts. And you can do that in many different ways, such as a scenario description or images of the various characters which have been used in the game. But something to really allow people to latch onto the themes which you're going to explore in the game or in the performance itself. And then when the action of the game starts, I think it helps to really think in a way that you're trying to hook the audience in, you're trying to hook the players in. I think scenarios work when they're a little bit like a play or even a movie. You're trying to keep things tense, you're trying to start really rolling the dice and moving into contact as quickly as possible. You're not really going to want to have a prolonged period of just moving around. Something needs to happen imminently. And you can think back to your favourite play, or you can think back to your favourite movie. Something always happens fairly early on. A classic example might be Saving Private Ryan. You're immersed in the action right from the moment that the landing craft are approaching Omaha Beach. And you can think of a play like Hamlet with the ghost appearing. Something's happening immediately to snatch your attention from whatever you might be thinking about. And then to really bring out the highlight of what I'm trying to talk about, I often like to think that in a war game, especially a participation game, you're trying to create bright colours but on a dark stage. You're trying to bring the background of the war game to life by placing an accent on certain things, not on everything. You want your players to react and focus on the bright colours. You want your focus to really be on the message that you're trying to import. And to do that, sometimes you need to dull down the other features. So you might want to concentrate on the background and character of the various big men or leaders in your game. And if you did that, perhaps you wouldn't worry so much about things like ammunition rules or featuring terrain, which might have its own special mechanisms. Too much detail in too many places crowds out the best thing in a game. So my message and my inspiration from the theatre would really be to find your essence and bring it to the centre stage and do that alone. So if you're looking to do one thing and have your players take that one thing away from the game, that needs to be the star of the show.